Hey everyone, Tactics here with my second last Keystone hero walkthrough of Dragonflight Season 3, where in this video we're going to be running into a 22 Black Rook hold here that I've done, just kind of showing you guys the route that I used, how we handled the various bosses and trash pulls, and just some other tips and tricks that will hopefully help you guys get your dungeon portal. I've got videos just like this one for almost every other dungeon now available over on my channel. Plus, I'm going to continue doing these beyond into Season 4 of Dragonflight and the War Within expansion. So if you enjoy this kind of content, make sure you do subscribe for more stuff like it. Otherwise, let's not waste time and jump into the run itself here. 1.25 times speed, just for brevity, and we got, of course, a big pull off the top here with Bloodlust and everything. The only thing you want to worry about is making sure you pull these counselors in. Something you can do if you don't have as many kicks as we did to get them in is you can just pull this first counselor into like this room a little bit more forward so that this pack just groups up a bit better. But for us, it wasn't too bad, but as you can see, basically just popping CDs, nuking these guys down, getting as many kicks as possible. AoE stops to get rid of those magic debuffs from going out. The soul blades, they can be quite scary if they target the same person, for example. Someone that already has a soul blade gets a second soul blade. Very, very spooky, and you're basically, especially on Fort Weeks, just worried about the wombo combo potential of the random target soul blasts and the random target soul blades going to the same person, because eventually, if you miss stops, your healer's going to run out of magic dispels, right? So you're not going to be able to get everything down there, so keep that in mind. Protectors here, you can move them out of that sacrifice soul AoE, as you see me doing. We can still keep full cleave on them and get value of the damage amp from the protector, so that's ideal if you can pull the mobs just out of the circle. But obviously with a large number of casters, that could be more difficult. Mini boss did bathe a little bit there in that big DR as well, so it's going to be significantly higher here. Be aware, strike down is a much larger frontal than it looks. Obviously there's like no animation, right? So it's very, very hard to kind of see. So melee need to be quite careful. Be directly behind and then a little bit back at max melee range if you can. Tanks as well, also note you can backstep the frontal here. Yeah, there, I do it there. I just walk back out of it, does 0 damage, you don't get a debuff, so that's nice potentially if you're you know, at the start of the pull, especially to avoid the damage amp that it comes with strike down. So something to note there. Otherwise, first boss, there's not really a ton to talk about here. It's fairly simple. As you see, I just pull back to the edge of the room a bit and face it away from the group. Not really a ton there, you know, spreading out to avoid sides. Soul Echo placement. Let's see if we do a good one here. Yeah, you can put 3, I believe, in one spot. You don't need to rotate this much, so you can put 3 in one spot. Yeah, not a great first one, but yeah, and then you can move, put 3 in the next spot, move, because they have a bit of a delay before they actually explode. And so if you have multiple melee or range or whatever, you can just conserve a decent amount of space, especially with these sides spinning around. That kind of thing can be a bit annoying to deal with here. If you have a ton of space, though, I mean, you can do this, right? But obviously, to conserve the most space, you would drop a few on top of each other, just so you don't spread it out too much. But you can see it's not a big deal, too. He's just running around in a circle. That works as well, especially as a ranged player. It's mostly in melee where you don't really want to clutter it up too much, especially with that frontal going off as well. But I guess we can move on to like intermission stuff, because there's not really a ton else with this boss here itself. It's just kind of rinse and repeats. Coal Souls, technically a strat you can do is you can just CC one of these, kill the rest, and then the boss will like auto transition to like 15% health or something like that. Honestly, it's not really necessary because of like how I mentioned, this boss is quite straightforward, not really a ton of damage going out. It's relatively easy, honestly. So you know, you can milk this if you want, but it's not necessary at all. Make sure everyone pops a defensive at the end of this cast, soul burst cast here. Have a defensive, use the AoE draw like a MZ, that kind of thing there, because when else are you going to use it, right? That's really the only spot. So use them there, survive that hit, especially on higher tyrannical keys, and then just rinse and repeat for the rest of the boss fight. Moving forward, this 30-second RP still exists for some reason. And then we're going to the spiders. So you have a couple options here with the spiders, right? I believe we're going to go up here. Yeah, so we go all the way up here with this one. So it's all about speed here and staying ahead of these spiders so you don't get super stacked up initially. We get to the top, we get to this 2-pack, and I'm just going to turn around and face it here because, of course, this 2-pack has a frontal guy in it. And now I'm going to aggro here, and now I'm going to chain things like you got your regular healer magic dispel, you've got your dwarf racial, and you've got my bubble that I popped there as well to just as what I have in my kind of kit to deal with those things. Obviously, if you're not a dwarf, you're not a paladin, you're really mostly relying on the dispo from the healer. Obviously, there's things like DKs. You can use AMS. That's pretty useful. Things like AoE stuns or knockbacks to keep the small spiders away from you and kill them before they can actually stack you up too high. Also useful, right? Shockwave, Typhoon, those kind of things. So there's things in your kit. The biggest thing is trying not to get hit too much, or of course using things like immunities, dwarf dispel, that kind of thing to clear stacks when you actually do get hit, and buy your healer dispel time to recover from the cooldown. Otherwise here, we're just kind of chain pulling in this area. Pretty scary once you get into higher fortified keys. The random damage going out from the archers, as well as potentially any ticks of knife dance that go out can be quite scary. If you miss a kick on Arcane Blitz, can be scary as well. So just be careful here. That shoot again is particularly scary for cloth wearers when this goes out, so just be aware of that. And just make sure you have stops assigned to that knife dance. Arrow barrage is less of a big deal, especially if people are aware of it and can kind of bait the jumps, because of course the archer does jump towards other players. So if you, for example, have everyone stand in melee and then one player stand out, you can kind of bait where these arrows are going to be shooting and going kind of deal, right? So it doesn't necessarily go to the furthest players you saw there. It just kind of jumps out to a random player. But if everyone is kind of in the same relative place, it's much easier to just avoid it, as opposed to if you have 5 people kind of spread out throughout a pack, you don't know which direction the arrow barrage is going to shoot through, so there's a good chance players are going to eat multiple ticks of that ability. So stay relatively close together there to help deal with that. Otherwise, of course, you got the cat. The cat is rough. Where's the cat? Is that the cat out there? No, it's an archer. Cat's probably going to pat into us here in a second, unless it already did. Where is it? Oh, did I miss the cat? Did we just murder the cat? Oh, there it is. Yeah, so make sure you are spread out for this cat, because he jumps to a random player, and it's an AoE bleed around them. I believe it's 8 yards even, so it's relatively big, and of course no animation and no cast time for that ability. So you just kind of need to be pre-spread and immediately focus down that mob when it's in the pack. There's only one you have to deal with. I think DKs can actually steal it as well, so potentially something you could do with Control Undead. I believe it's an Undead actually, so keep that in mind if you have like a Blood DK, for example, too. For this pack, just pulling it around, you have 2 options really. It's just don't have your group get in combat initially, or have your group also LOS with you. Otherwise the archers will start like shooting if they like enter combat over here, for example, which is not ideal. You want to group them all up. Same deal too. Watch the double archers here for the double shoots. Make sure you have stops on the scout. Same deal here. There's 2 archers and 2 scouts, so this is probably one of the scarier pulls here as well. So just be aware of that. There's a frontal in it as well. You want stops for the knife dance. You want to stay relatively grouped. You don't need to worry about stopping the archers if you're able to just sidestep their barrages. You can obviously use in any incidental stops there. Like I think I stopped a scout, opening my talents, I guess, repeatedly to show someone. But if I stop a scout and it happens to also stop like this, an archer, great. But I'm not going to specifically use a stop on this guy right there, right? So he's shooting off into nowhere. That's perfectly fine. Let him do that. Nothing really much to talk about here. Double archer. Again, you can watch where you're baiting these archers, because it can be annoying if they jump down the stairs. But, you know, it's not too much else to talk about, guys. Then we get to Raven Crest. So let's see if in this run we did this boss right. So basically, Brutal Glaive, range, just want to be, you know, spread out so you don't cleave this. Boom. It just takes it alone. Only one person has that bleed. It's relatively long too. Dark Rush goes out here. So we're going to see, I think, yeah, this is where we don't go on the same side of the room, I think. So ideally you have the 3 targets on the same side of the room. Yeah, we had someone on the opposite side of the room there. Not a big deal. We just cut off the beginning of our room a little bit here, so you can't use this side anymore. It's whatever. But ideally, if we were all along the same wall here, it would just paint the side of this wall and you have a ton of space still. But then the intermission starts. I pick up the mobs real quick. I try and pull them directly under the boss here, just so you get some nice cleave, right? Because, of course, the boss is fully hittable in this phase, and range is kind of painting the ground here. I guess notably, as a healer as well, there's a neat little tech you can do right now. Might get fixed. Be careful if you do this, where you can just jump up and down on the same spot, and you just concentrate this entire amount of stuff in one spot instead of drawing all this fire. Obviously, you have a ton of space, so it's not a big deal, especially if you're a low range comp. But little tech, for mobile range DPS as well, you can do that. It's just obviously for any casters, you can't be hard casting and jumping at the same time, so you can't really do that. But And healers, any mobile casters can do that, of course. Other than that, this fight just kind of repeats. It is good to note, though, this second boss phase is significantly longer than the first one because the boss starts at 0 energy compared to, if you look at when you pull the boss, right, the boss starts at 65 energy, right? So it's a much longer boss phase after the first intermission. So keep that in mind. You have to deal with it for a bit longer. And again, just moving this stuff along the edge to kind of reduce the size of these fire puddles is ideal. Moving up here, we got some big pulls. Big pulls, making sure I pick up all these tricksters. Let's see how big I go. I think I probably do this in 2 pulls. Yeah. Do a little 2 pull here. Again, you can do this in 3 pulls if you're scared. You can do this in 1 pull if you're feeling it. It is, whatever you're kind of feeling. You just want to make sure you are coordinating some kind of AoE CCs on these scavengers here. The drink ancient potion is what you're worried about. You want to stop for as long as possible. 3 potential options. I believe it was 3. Yeah, so the indigestion is 1. Frontal. It's not too scary. The scariest one by far is for sure the Bladestorm one. And then there's another one where they become big and stationary and hit the tank harder. So there it is. Boom. That guy became big for a bit. And so those are the 3, and this guy is super scary if you don't have like a single target stun for him, because on Fort Weeks especially, that guy just straight one-shots your DPS. It's crazy. So be aware of those guys. If they start spinning, they get that little runner buff on them. That's when you know melee. Oh my god, you're worried. You're worried. Get away from them. Anyways, second half of the pull here. This one's a little easier. I think we pulled probably 2 mobs too much in the previous one, but same deal. The tricksters do nothing. They do literally nothing, so don't worry about them. It's the scavengers, the drink potions you're worried about. There's the, the big buff that hits your tank. And Blade Lords have the Enrage and 1 channel tank it as well, so you can use a stop incidental, again, usually on those guys, because it does seem to be less tuned up than it was back in Legion, so not as scary. Then you get to the Gauntlet. Now, this was nerfed to only have the bats target, like 4 bats, I believe, on 1 player instead of all the bats. So that is a benefit. And really, there's a few ways to do this. So one, if we had pulled a couple more mobs earlier in the dungeon, which you can do, there's like a side room and there's these 2 guys here, you can actually skip these first 2 Dominators with an Invis pod. So that's one option. You can do a double Dominator skip, pull the last 2 Dominators all the way through to the boss room like you normally would. That's an option. The other thing you can do is you can pull 2 and 2. So you can pull 2 either down the stairs to try and reduce the number of bats, or just up to where the second guy is, kill the Dominators, and then continue forward. People targeted by the bats need to be aware if you're doing that and run down the stairs away from them, or use Nox, CCs, that kind of thing, to prevent the bats from actually eating them. Or you can do what we do, and we just kind of mark kicks going in, and we are going to go all the way through to the top here. Boom, all 4 in 1 pull. You see we have markers, and basically people targeted by sick bats that aren't me are just going to run backwards through this room, and you have a decent amount of space to kite on either side, and we're just going to try and get as many kicks as possible on these Dominators. Obviously some are going to start going off, and I think it gets kind of crazy near the end here. So tanks, if you need to kite because you're missing a lot of kicks, feel free to do that. I think I end up kiting at some point. Maybe I don't. We'll see, because these guys are getting quite big. They're already 4 stacked up, and of course this is AoE, so it will apply to all of them. So not ideal for sure if they start getting 2 stacked up. You can see I'm rotating through all of my defensives here to make sure. And now we're getting all the kicks. Now we're reset. Now we're chill. So with 3, it's pretty easy with a couple melee kicks to get them all, especially if you're Paladin in your group. But with 4, it's a little rougher. So be aware of that. Then we come to Smash Bite. This boss can be quite scary if you don't have a great soak order here. So basically this is like a 500% I think damage increase. Maybe it's less than 500. I think it's a massive number damage increase. And so basically as a tank player, you can take 1 easily. A lot of players can take 1. The second one, you want to make sure you have a major defensive up, and the third one needs to be immune, or it's very dangerous, right? So you can see there, I took that second one with Sentinel and Ardent up, and it wasn't too scary. Actually, no, I had an absorb shield as well, so that's why I didn't move my health. But taking a third one is quite scary. So what you can do to get around that is a few things. Of course, bop can help. You can bop another person and then let another person take an individual stack. Any kind of other immunity like Nether Walk, personal bubble from a different paladin, ice block, that kind of thing works great. Notably, actually on the topic of ice block and stuff like that, do not combat drop this guy. He will just instantly charge. like invis, vanish, that kind of stuff does not work. So warning, don't do that. But immunities, evasion is really, really good, especially because outlaw rogues, they actually have really big CDR on evasion right now, and so outlaw rogues can evasion very often. So an outlaw rogue alone in your group, they can usually take one soak to the face as their one stack, then they can evasion the second stack, then take no damage from that and go up to 2 stacks, and then you can do 2 stacks of the tank. So you can alternate between a tank and a rogue, basically 2 stacks, 2 stacks, 2 stacks, 2 stacks the whole fight, which is very, very nice. So that's a potential option if you have a rogue, but really just any kind of immunity can work. And if you don't have another immunity in your group, you can just have players take 1 hit and then another player take 1 hit and then go back to the tank. So either a 2-1-1 rotation or a 2-2 rotation if you have immunities or whatever it is that works, just to spread out the charge damage so your tank doesn't get one shot. The real thing you're worried about is this one here. So it's going to go hit into stomp. And so you just need to be worried if that's ever not on a tank player, that player needs to make sure they get topped or make sure they use a personal for that stomp, especially on higher tyrannical keys. You see on this gaze coming up, there's not that overlap, right? The gaze will go out and then you'll have a couple seconds before the earth stomp. But so just keep that in mind. Sometimes he like instantly does it, right? Boom. There was a few seconds there longer between that one, but occasionally on the overlaps, he will just boom, charge someone, and then immediately stomps. That's the ones you want to be scared of if specifically it's charging into a non-tank. Otherwise, with this vomit, like you can try and bait it like we're doing here along the sides of the room, and then I'm going to leave after I eat this charge here. But sometimes, for whatever reason, like you saw there was the green beam, like I'll rewind, where you can see this green beam, right? So that is where it's going to come from. So the vomit comes from the other end of this green beam and shoots in a straight line towards the player. But for some reason, whatever reason, sometimes you can't see your beam, and I don't know why, but it just doesn't show up sometimes. So hopefully that gets fixed. Like here, I can't see Mills's beam, for example, right? But I saw Zen's beam, and I couldn't see that beam over there. But like sometimes you randomly see beams, sometimes you don't. I don't understand why you do or don't or whatever it is. I hope they just fix it so you can always see beams. That would make baiting these way, way, way easier. Otherwise, you're just kind of hoping and standing in relatively position, where you want it to be, and you're hoping that it's coming from a certain direction when you have no idea. So that's something to keep in mind. That was just Ardent on a second stack, by the way. So that's how scary it actually looks if you don't pop a lot for that second stack even. And so definitely like going to a third stack, if you aren't immuning it, you're dead for sure. Keep that in mind, tanks and honestly anyone in general. But otherwise, it's just about keeping that rotation and trying not to run too much out of space, right? That was me taking it with an immune, of course. That was a third stack. But, otherwise moving out of this boss room. We do have Lust available. I think we didn't use it there because we are going to get to the last boss well before it would have come off cooldown. But potentially on higher tyrannical keys, you would Lust that boss. And then you would have Lust for this boss as well. Maybe, I don't know. We'd have to see how the Lust timings work on a higher key, but potential option for sure. Of course, big pull here. Everything up to the boss room, because really it's mostly tank damage. It's coup de grace from the swordsman, which can be backstepped to avoid the damage. Notably good for tanks. But Raven's Dive here can be a little scary in this room because the carpet in the middle of the room does block your vision of it. So be aware. Tanks, of course, there it is. Completely blocked vision. It's a death sentence to get hit by Raven's Dive in this room if you don't have a way to get out of it instantly. So be aware of that. Otherwise, just big AoE here. I think we died of bursting. Yeah, there's a nice big burst here. Oh no, it must be a Raven's Dive at the end. Yes, it's the Raven's Dive at the end. Okay. We got the bursting. Easy mass spell. And then you get to the last boss here. And basically, a lot of people have been lusting on pull here on this boss, which I think is better. We don't, but I think it is better because this phase, one, you've got random shadow bolts going out, which hurt quite a bit. It was recently nerfed. It had variants to it, so it's constant out, but look how much damage that one shadow bolt did, and then the second one hit me. Like, it's scary. Look at it. Like, that is big damage on the shadow bolt. So people are lusting on pull now, just to kill this phase ASAP and stop those shadow bolts from going out. Side effect of stopping or reducing the number of bleeds on the tank, right? Because these are permanent bleeds on the tank here. Obviously, you can clear them, I believe, with bubble. I don't actually know if dwarf works. I assume it's just a bleed. Not 100% sure, but I assume it is. So you could dwarf it off. I believe I bubble at some point and just get rid of those stacks. But getting out of this phase quickly is very, very good. just to reduce, the chance of someone getting randomly shadow bolted to death and the number of attacks on the tank, that kind of thing. And then you come into this phase, and you do not have your big health damage amp stuff for the first Shadow Ball volley. Big important note. Pop the whole bag. Anything you have left, you dump into this Shadow Ball volley defensively, because, this is the one last thing in this fight, really, that's going to murder you for sure. So boom, AMZ goes down. Everyone's personaling Zephyr goes out. We survive it, and now we're not really worried because now we're buffed. All these other Shadow Ball volleys are going to hit relatively less hard. Like, really, that's nothing on that actual Shadow Ball volley, and it deals like less damage almost, maybe the same as the first one that had everything on it. So that's the gap there. Watch the direction. It can go either direction. I've seen it rotate in both directions, so don't always commit to one direction. And you want to just make sure when you're coming up to those sleep puddles, you're going to the side. You see what I did, basically. I went next to the sleep puddle on the start, so it was easy to avoid, and I wasn't too worried about it. Otherwise, just stay relatively close to the boss, so it's easy to cleave these stinging swarms. They're quite annoying, so that's like the one other combo that can kill you, I guess, is the stinging swarm being on you for too long, combined with like a Shadow Ball volley. But honestly, most of the rest of this fight is not very scary once you get past that initial volley. But that is it, guys, for this walkthrough. Hopefully you found it useful, and if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like it, including Pool 1% title level key route walkthroughs later on in the season, and of course more guide content coming in Dragonflight Season 4 and even beyond into the War Within. If you have any questions about this run, please let me know down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer. And don't forget to stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics, where I stream all of my key pushing and raid progression from a tank PvP. Of course, I have to give a massive thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon. It really means a lot, guys. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.